My name is Connie, and I am 55 years old. 3 weeks after my husband Walter passed away, I stood before his grave with a secret burning in my chest. We had been married for 18 beautiful years. I thought I knew everything about him. Then the lawyer read the will, and I discovered Walter had left everything to his ex-wife's son. Not a single penny for me. But there was one sentence I spoke at his grave that day. Only Derek, his stepson, understood what it meant. And that sentence changed everything. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below with your location. If you have ever discovered a painful secret about someone you loved after they were gone, hit that like button. And subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the rest of this story. Because what I found hidden at a lighthouse will leave you speechless. Walter came into my life 20 years ago at St. Mary's Hospital in Pennsylvania. I was working the night shift as a nurse when he walked through the emergency room doors. He was not a patient. He had come to visit a friend who had been injured in a construction accident. I remember looking up from my station and seeing this tall man with salt and pepper hair standing by the vending machine struggling to get his dollar bill to go in straight. I walked over to help him. Our fingers touched briefly when I took the bill from his hand. He looked at me with those warm brown eyes and smiled. That was the moment I knew my life was about to change. Walter was a widower at the time. His second wife, Margaret, had passed away from ovarian cancer 3 years earlier. He told me about her during our first coffee together. He spoke about her with such tenderness that I knew this was a man capable of deep love. What he did not tell me right away was the complicated story of his first marriage. It took several months before Walter opened up about Sandra. They had married young, too young perhaps. She was beautiful and charming, and he was completely in love with her. They had a son together, or so Walter believed. Derek was born 2 years into their marriage. Walter adored that boy from the first moment he held him in his arms. But when Derek was 2 years old, Walter discovered the truth. Sandra had been having an affair throughout their marriage. Derek was not his biological son. The real father was a man Sandra had been seeing before their wedding and had never truly given up. The divorce was painful. Walter told me he cried for weeks, not because of Sandra's betrayal, but because he was losing Derek. The court gave Sandra full custody. Walter was allowed visitation rights because his name was on the birth certificate. But Sandra made those visits increasingly difficult. Despite everything, Walter never stopped loving Derek. He sent birthday cards every year. He contributed to Derek's college fund. He showed up to graduations even when Sandra glared at him from across the room. Walter used to say that Derek was innocent in all of this. A child does not choose his parents. When Walter and I started dating seriously, I knew about Derek. I understood that Walter carried this complicated love in his heart. I never felt jealous. How could I be jealous of a man's love for a child he had raised, even if only for 2 short years? We got married after 2 years of courtship. It was a small ceremony in the backyard of Walter's home. Just close friends, my sister Helen, and a few neighbors. Walter wore his father's watch, the same watch that would later become the center of my heartbreak. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace. We promised to love each other until death parted us. For 18 years, we kept that promise. Walter ran his woodworking shop in town. He made beautiful furniture by hand, dining tables, rocking chairs, jewelry boxes. Each piece was crafted with love and patience. I would often visit him at the shop after my shifts at the hospital. The smell of fresh sawdust became one of my favorite scents in the world. Walter and Derek maintained their relationship over the years, though I rarely saw Derek in person. He lived in another city with Sandra. Once or twice a year, Walter would drive to see him. He always came back from those visits with a mixture of happiness and sadness in his eyes. 3 months before Walter died, things started to change. He began having headaches that would not go away. He forgot appointments. Once he called me by Margaret's name, then looked confused and apologized. I knew something was wrong. My nursing instincts were screaming at me. I made him see a doctor. The results were concerning. The doctor said there were signs of reduced blood flow to the brain, possible mini strokes. They recommended monitoring and lifestyle changes. Walter promised to take it easy, but he kept working at the shop, kept pushing himself. 2 months before he left me, Walter collapsed in his workshop. One of his employees called 911. By the time I reached the hospital, he was already in the intensive care unit. I held his hand for 3 days straight. I talked to him. I read him his favorite poems. I told him about the lighthouse at Cape May where we had spent our honeymoon. On the 3rd day, Walter opened his eyes. He looked at me with such intensity. His hand gripped mine with surprising strength. He whispered words that made no sense to me at the time. The lighthouse, Connie. Remember the lighthouse? I thought he was confused, delirious from the medication. I kissed his forehead and told him to rest. He died an hour later. The funeral was held on a gray October morning. Pastor Thomas delivered a beautiful eulogy. Friends from the woodworking community came to pay their respects. My sister Helen flew in from Pittsburgh. Gloria, my best friend from the hospital, stood beside me the whole time. And then there was Sandra and Derek. I had not seen Sandra in years. She walked into the funeral home wearing a black designer dress and sunglasses, as if she were attending a Hollywood premiere rather than the funeral of a man she had betrayed decades ago. Derek followed behind her. He was 36 now, a grown man with his father's build, but his mother's cold eyes. He avoided looking at me throughout the service. I did not have the energy to wonder why they were there. I was too consumed by grief. Walter was gone, my best friend, my partner, my love. Nothing else mattered. If only I had known what was coming. 1 week after the funeral, I received a phone call that would shatter my world. The caller was Marcus Walter's lawyer. He asked me to come to his office for the reading of the will. His voice sounded strange, hesitant, in a way that made me uneasy. I put on the same black dress I had worn to the funeral. I clasped the necklace Walter had given me for our 10th anniversary. I drove to the law office expecting a routine procedure. Walter and I had discussed our wills years ago. Everything would go to each other. That was what we had agreed. When I walked into Marcus's conference room, my heart stopped. Sandra was already there, seated at the long mahogany table. Derek sat beside her. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. In fact, Sandra had a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. I took a seat across from them. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus cleared his throat and began reading. The will he held was dated just 2 months before Walter's death, right around the time his symptoms had started. I listened as Marcus read through the standard legal language, and then came the part that destroyed me. I, Walter James Patterson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave all my earthly possessions to Derek Allen Mitchell. This includes my home at 742 Maple Street, my woodworking business known as Patterson's Fine Furniture, all bank accounts, investments, and vehicles registered in my name. Marcus paused. He would not meet my eyes. To my wife, Constance Marie Patterson. I leave my personal effects, including clothing books and my father's pocket watch. That was it. 18 years of marriage, 18 years of love and partnership and sacrifice. And I was left with a box of old clothes and a broken watch. The total value of Walter's estate was approximately $450,000. Every penny of it was going to Derek. I could not breathe. I asked Marcus to read it again. He did. The words did not change. How is this possible? I asked. Walter never mentioned changing his will. He never said anything about this. Marcus shuffled his papers nervously. Patterson came to my office 2 months ago. He requested these changes. He seemed certain about his wishes. I stared at the lawyer. Who was with him when he came? Marcus hesitated. There was a woman. She drove him. I did not get her name. I looked at Sandra. She was still smiling. Derek stared at the table, his jaw tight. I asked Derek directly, "Did you know about this?" He finally looked at me. His eyes held something I could not quite read. He shook his head slightly, but said nothing. Sandra stood up, smoothing her dress. Well, I think that settles everything. Walter wanted to make amends for all those years he abandoned Derek. We should all respect his final wishes. She took Derek's arm and led him out of the room. I sat there alone with Marcus, trying to understand what had just happened. Marcus offered a weak apology. He said the will was legally valid, properly witnessed, notarized. There was nothing he could do. I drove home in a daze. I parked in the driveway of the house that was no longer mine. I sat in the car for an hour, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. $20,000 in savings would not last forever. I had given up my nursing career 2 years ago to take care of Walter when his health first started declining. I had no income, no home, nothing but a box of memories and a watch that no longer ticked. That night I did not cry. The pain was too deep for tears. I lay in our bed, breathing in the faint scent of Walter's cologne on his pillow, and wondered if I had ever really known my husband at all. 3 days after the reading of the will, I began to sort through Walter's personal belongings. The executor had given me 1 month to remove my possessions from the house before Derek would take ownership. 1 month to pack up 18 years of marriage. I started with Walter's closet, his flannel shirts, his work boots, the tweed jacket he wore to church every Sunday. I folded each item carefully, even though I had no idea what I would do with them. In the pocket of an old corduroy jacket, my fingers touched paper. I pulled out a small leather notebook I had never seen before. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it to find Walter's handwriting. Most of the entries were notes about furniture projects, measurements, wood types, customer preferences. But near the back of the notebook, I found something different. There was a heading that made my breath catch. For Connie, if something happens. Below it, Walter had written several lines. Cape May Lighthouse, June 15th. Safety box, number 7. If you are reading this, I am sorry. I knew she would try. I prepared for it. You are my lighthouse, Connie. I will guide you home. My hands trembled as I read the words again. Cape May, the lighthouse where we had spent our honeymoon, the place Walter mentioned in his final moments. The lighthouse, Connie. Remember the lighthouse? He had not been delirious. He had been trying to tell me something. I grabbed my car keys and drove. It was a 4-hour journey from Pennsylvania to Cape May, New Jersey. I barely stopped except for gas. My mind raced the entire way. What had Walter hidden? What did he know? What had Sandra done? The lighthouse stood tall against the gray November sky when I arrived. It looked exactly as I remembered from 20 years ago. Walter and I had walked along this beach on our wedding night. We had climbed to the top of the lighthouse and watched the sunset over the Atlantic. Near the lighthouse, there was a small gift shop that had been there for decades. I remembered Walter chatting with the elderly woman who owned it. She had told us about the history of the lighthouse and the shipwrecks it had prevented. I walked into the shop. The same woman sat behind the counter, 20 years older now, but still sharp-eyed and alert. I asked if she remembered Walter Patterson. Her face lit up with recognition. Of course. The woodworker from Pennsylvania. He came by about 6 months ago, left something for his wife. My heart pounded. He left something for me, she nodded, and led me to a back room where a row of small safety deposit boxes lined the wall. She explained that some longtime customers used these boxes to store sentimental items, a service they had offered for over 40 years. She handed me a key, box number 7. He said only his wife would come for it, made me promise not to give it to anyone else. I opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a large manila envelope. I took it to a bench outside and sat facing the ocean as I opened it. The first document I pulled out was a will, but not the will Marcus had read. This one was dated 5 years ago, the original will. I read through it quickly. In this version, I was to receive the house and the savings accounts. Derek was to receive the woodworking shop and a portion of the investments. It was fair. It was what Walter and I had discussed. This was the real will, the one Walter had wanted it. Beneath the will was a handwritten letter. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might crumble in my hands. My dearest Connie, the letter began. If you are reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. I knew Sandra would try something when I became vulnerable. She contacted me 6 months ago, saying Derek was in financial trouble. I doubted it. Derek has a good job. But Sandra was persistent. Then my health started failing. The headaches, the confusion. I knew I was becoming an easy target. I wrote this letter and secured the original will here at our lighthouse because I knew Sandra could not manipulate this. She does not know about this place. Only you and I share this memory. I do not trust Marcus. He has known Sandra for years. I suspect he can be bought. Do not use him. Find another lawyer. Someone honest. My love, you are my lighthouse. You have guided me through the darkest years of my life. I am sorry I could not protect you in person, but I hope this letter finds you and leads you home. All my love, forever and always. Walter. I sat on that bench and cried until I had no tears left. Walter had known. He had prepared. Even in his illness, even as his mind was failing, he had thought of me. He had left me a path to follow. The sun was setting over the Atlantic. The lighthouse beam began its slow rotation, cutting through the growing darkness. I folded the letter and placed it in my purse. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman with evidence, and I was going to fight. I returned home with a fire burning in my chest. The grief was still there, but now it shared space with something else. Purpose, determination, anger. My first stop was Sandra's apartment. She lived in a luxury high-rise downtown, a far cry from the modest neighborhood where I had built my life with Walter. I wondered how much of her lifestyle was funded by money meant for other people. She answered the door in a silk robe holding a glass of wine. Her surprise at seeing me was poorly disguised. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. I looked her straight in the eyes. "I want to know what you did to my husband." Sandra laughed. A brittle, ugly sound. I did not do anything. Walter made his own choices. He wanted to provide for his son. "He was sick," I said. "You approached him when he was confused, when he could not think clearly. You manipulated him into changing his will." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then the mask returned. "That is a serious accusation. I hope you have proof." I smiled. "I am getting it." I told her about the original will. I told her Walter had left it somewhere she could never find. I told her I was going to expose everything she had done. Sandra's composure cracked. Her face hardened into something ugly. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. That will is not valid anymore. The new one supersedes it. You have nothing." She slammed the door in my face, but I had seen the fear in her eyes. She knew I was on to her. My next step was finding Derek. I needed to know how much he really understood about what his mother had done. I tracked down his workplace, a small construction company on the outskirts of town. Derek was in the parking lot when I arrived, eating lunch in his truck. He looked genuinely surprised to see me. I asked if we could talk. He nodded and gestured for me to get in. I handed him a photocopy of the original will. I had made copies of everything and stored the originals in a safe deposit box at my bank. Derek read the document slowly. His face changed as he understood what he was looking at. "I did not know about this," he said quietly. "What did your mother tell you?" I asked. He rubbed his face with his hands. "She said Dad wanted to make up for all the years he missed. She said you were trying to keep everything for yourself. She said Dad finally saw the truth about you, and you believed her." Derek was quiet for a long moment. I wanted to. I wanted to believe my father finally chose me, finally put me first. His voice broke slightly, but something did not feel right. "Dad always talked about you like you were the best thing in his life. It did not make sense that he would leave you with nothing." I handed him the copy of Walter's letter. "Read this." Derek read. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face. "She lied to me," he whispered. "She used me to steal from you." I placed my hand on his arm. "You did not know? Your father loved you, Derek. That was never a lie. But your mother saw an opportunity and she took it. Derek wiped his eyes. What do we do now? We find the truth, I said, together. Over the next few weeks, Derek and I became unlikely allies. We tracked down Raymond, the notary public, who had witnessed the new will. At first, he refused to speak with us. He threatened to call the police. Then Derek confronted him directly. He told Raymond that he was prepared to go to the authorities and report suspected fraud. He said he would tell them everything about how his mother had paid Raymond to notarize a document signed by a man who was not mentally competent. Raymond crumbled. He admitted that Sandra had paid him $5,000 to witness the will. He admitted that Walter had seemed confused that day, tired, not fully present. He had just been released from the hospital after a minor procedure, and Sandra had rushed him to the notary's office before the sedation fully wore off. Raymond agreed to provide a written statement in exchange for not being reported immediately. We also gathered medical records. Walter's doctors confirmed that during the period when the new will was signed, he was experiencing significant cognitive impairment. The many strokes had affected his judgment. He was easily influenced, easily confused. One of Walter's neighbors came forward as well. She told us she had seen Sandra visiting the house multiple times when I was at work. She overheard Sandra telling Walter that Derek would hurt himself if Walter did not help, that Derek was desperate, that only Walter could save him. It was a cruel manipulation. Walter's love for Derek had been weaponized against him. Each piece of evidence brought us closer to the truth, and further from any doubt about what Sandra had done. 49 days after Walter's death, we held a memorial at his grave. It was a tradition in Walter's family to gather 7 weeks after a passing to honor the deceased one final time. I arranged for Pastor Thomas to lead a brief service. Gloria helped me prepare flowers. Helen flew in again from Pittsburgh. A few of Walter's woodworking colleagues came as well, and then Sandra and Derek arrived together. Sandra looked confident. She did not know what Derek and I had discovered. She did not know her son had already chosen a side. We gathered around the grave. The headstone was simple, just as Walter would have wanted. His name, his dates, and a single phrase he had once told me he wanted inscribed, "A craftsman of wood and love." Pastor Thomas spoke about Walter's generous spirit, about his dedication to his work, about the love he had for those around him. Then Sandra stepped forward. She had prepared a speech about how Walter had been a devoted father to Derek, about how he had finally recognized the importance of family in his last days. Every word dripped with false sweetness. I watched Derek's jaw tighten as his mother spoke, but he stayed silent. When Sandra finished, Pastor Thomas asked if anyone else wanted to say a few words. I stepped forward. I looked at the grave for a long moment. I thought about everything Walter had done for me, everything he had sacrificed, the letter he had written, the will he had hidden, the way he had loved me even when he could no longer protect me in person. I spoke softly, but my voice carried in the still winter air. Walter, you were my lighthouse, and you guided me home. Sandra looked confused. She did not understand. To her, they were just poetic words from a grieving widow. But Derek understood. His face went pale. His eyes met mine across the grave. I saw recognition dawn in them. Months ago, during one of Derek's rare solo visits to Walter, Walter had told him something important. He had said that if anyone ever spoke those words to Derek, anyone at all, Derek should trust that person completely. Walter had made Derek promise to remember. Derek had thought it was just his father being sentimental. He had not understood why it mattered. Now he did. After the service, as people began to disperse, Derek approached me. Sandra tried to pull him away, but he shook off her hand. He spoke quietly so only I could hear. Dad told me about that phrase. He said the lighthouse was your place, yours and his. He said only you would know. I nodded. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. He was telling me to trust you. He knew this would happen. Yes, I said, he knew. Derek turned to look at his mother. Sandra was watching us with growing unease. She could not hear what we were saying, but she could see that something had shifted. Derek looked back at me. Can you show me the letter? I need to see it for myself. Come to my house tonight, I said. I will show you everything. Sandra called out to Derek, demanding to know what we were discussing. Derek ignored her. He walked to his car without looking back. That night, Derek sat in Walter's favorite chair and read the original letter. He studied the will. He reviewed the statements from Raymond and the neighbors. He looked at the medical records. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I am sorry for what she did. I am sorry I did not see it sooner. You could not have known. Derek shook his head. I should have questioned it. Dad never stopped loving you. I knew that. Anyone who saw you two together knew that. I just wanted so badly to believe he chose me. He did choose you, I said gently. In the original will, you were supposed to receive the shop. Your father wanted you to carry on his legacy. That was real. Derek's eyes filled with tears. And my mother tried to turn that into something ugly. I reached across and took his hand. We are both victims here, but we can make this right. Together. Derek squeezed my hand. Together. I hired a new lawyer named Victoria. She specialized in estate disputes and had a reputation for being both brilliant and ethical. When I presented her with all the evidence we had gathered, she said this was one of the clearest cases of undue influence she had ever seen. We filed a lawsuit to invalidate the fraudulent will and restore the original one. Sandra was served with papers the following week. Her response was immediate and vicious. She called me at all hours, leaving threatening voicemails. She accused me of manipulating Derek. She said I was a gold digger trying to steal what rightfully belonged to her son. I saved every voicemail. More evidence. Marcus Walter's original lawyer was also named in the lawsuit for failing to properly verify Walter's mental competency. He tried to claim he had no knowledge of any wrongdoing, but Raymond's testimony contradicted him. Phone records showed that Sandra and Marcus had spoken multiple times in the weeks leading up to the will change. The court date arrived on a cold morning in February. The courtroom was small but imposing. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, the weight of justice in every corner. Sandra arrived with her own lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit. She wore a look of righteous indignation, playing the role of the wronged mother perfectly. But she had not counted on Derek. When Derek took the stand as a witness for my side, Sandra's face went white. She had expected her son to support her. Instead, he testified about every lie she had told him, about how she had convinced him that Walter wanted to reconcile, about how she had described me as a manipulative woman trying to keep Walter from his true family. He described the moment he read his father's letter, the moment he understood that his mother had used Walter's love against him. Sandra's lawyer tried to discredit Derek, suggesting he had been manipulated by me, but Derek's testimony was too detailed, too specific, too obviously sincere. I presented the original will from the lighthouse. I read portions of Walter's letter aloud. The medical records were admitted as evidence. Raymond's confession was read into the record. By the end of the second day, the case was clear. The judge ruled that the new will was invalid due to lack of mental capacity and undue influence. The original will was reinstated. I would keep the house and the savings accounts. Derek would inherit the woodworking shop as Walter had intended. Sandra was referred to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges related to elder abuse and fraud. Marcus had his law license suspended pending an ethics investigation. Raymond was fined and banned from notary work indefinitely. As the judge read the verdict, I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I felt only a deep, quiet relief. Justice had been done. Walter's true wishes had been honored. After the courtroom emptied, Derek and I stood on the courthouse steps. The sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time in weeks. He apologized again for his mother. I told him again that he was not responsible for her choices. Then he asked me something unexpected. Would you teach me about the shop, about how Dad worked? I never really learned. I smiled for the first time in months. I would be honored. We walked down the courthouse steps together, two people connected by a man who had loved us both, moving forward into a future he had helped create. The months that followed the trial were a time of rebuilding, not just of my life, but of my understanding of love and loss and family. I kept the house on Maple Street. Every room held memories of Walter: the kitchen where he made his terrible but beloved Sunday pancakes, the living room where we had watched countless old movies together, the bedroom where I still sometimes reached for him in the middle of the night. But gradually, the house stopped feeling like a museum of grief. It became a home again, a place of healing. I started writing in a journal, recording all my memories of Walter, the big moments and the small ones. Our first date at that Italian restaurant where he spilled marinara sauce on his shirt, the way he hummed while working on his furniture, the look in his eyes when he told me I was his lighthouse. I wanted to make sure I never forgot. But I also found that writing the memories helped me carry them more lightly. Gloria came over regularly for coffee and conversation. She had been my rock throughout the ordeal. She never judged, never pushed, just listened and supported. Helen and I grew closer than we had been in years. She called every few days. Sometimes we talked for hours about nothing in particular. Sometimes we sat in comfortable silence on video calls, just keeping each other company. I joined a yoga class at the community center. It felt strange at first, moving my body after so many months of stillness, but slowly I began to feel stronger, more present. And then there was Derek. He took over the woodworking shop with the help of Walter's longtime employees. They welcomed him warmly. Many of them remembered Derek from his occasional visits over the years. They were happy to teach him the craft his father had loved. Derek was a quick learner, but more importantly, he approached the work with genuine respect. He did not want to change things. He wanted to carry on Walter's legacy exactly as it had been. Once a month, Derek and I would meet at the shop. He would show me his latest project. I would tell him stories about Walter that he had never heard. We filled in the gaps in each other's knowledge of the man we had both loved. On Walter's birthday, Derek presented me with a wooden jewelry box he had made himself. It was small and simple with a carved lighthouse on the lid. "For you," he said, "because you brought me home too." I cried when I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Derek had found it in Walter's old files at the shop. It showed Walter and me at Cape May on our honeymoon, standing in front of the lighthouse, young and in love and full of hope. I hugged Derek for a long time. Somewhere along the way, we had become something like family. The anniversary of Walter's death approached. I decided to return to Cape May. Derek offered to come with me. We drove together in comfortable silence, watching the winter landscape give way to the coastal plains of New Jersey. I had kept a small portion of Walter's ashes. I had never told anyone. It had felt too private, too sacred. We stood at the base of the lighthouse as the sun set, the same lighthouse where Walter and I had watched so many sunsets, the same lighthouse where he had hidden the truth that saved me. I opened the small container and let the ashes scatter in the ocean breeze. They drifted over the waves, becoming part of the sea. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "Thank you for the light you gave me." Derek stood beside me in respectful silence. When I was done, he put his arm around my shoulder. We drove home as the stars came out. I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Not because the grief was gone. It would never be completely gone. But because I had learned to carry it differently. Walter had taught me that love does not end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new ways to reach us. It leaves lighthouses in unexpected places waiting for us to find them. And sometimes the people we least expect become the family we need. If you are going through loss and feel like you have been abandoned, remember this: true love always finds a way to guide you home. It might be hidden in a notebook pocket. It might be waiting at a lighthouse. It might come through a connection with someone you never expected. But it is there. You just have to trust enough to look. I want to thank you for staying with me through this entire story. I know it was long, I know it was painful, but I also hope it gave you hope. Before I go, I have some questions for you. Have you ever discovered a secret about someone you loved after they were gone? How did you handle it? Have you ever found unexpected family in the most unlikely places? And have you ever had someone guide you through the darkness, even when they were no longer physically with you? Drop your answers in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and maybe find comfort in them too. If you are not already subscribed, consider joining our community. I share stories like this regularly, stories of real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, someone who is grieving or feeling abandoned or questioning whether love is real, please share this video with them. Sometimes a story can reach someone in ways that direct advice cannot. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. May you always find your lighthouse when the darkness comes. May you always have someone to guide you home. And may you never forget that love, true love, never really dies. It just finds new ways to shine. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.